kid, I've always been interested about new ideas. I think I still remember like wanting to be an inventor since I heard about like Thomas Edison and heard about great discoveries. So since a little kid, I've been sort of inventing little things as sort of trivial as I think I was in the bathtub once and like, you know what, we should be able to do stuff in the bathtub because it's so comfortable. So I sort of invented little gadgets to make my bathtub experience better, to trivial ideas to then, learning about science and the latest discoveries and wanting to be part of that. So I think what makes me is sort of having this curious sort of nature and wanting to learn new things, and learning these new things then it sort of inspired me to really be on the shoulders of giants and take that next step to build the next new thing. My background is I've been a cancer researcher for my PhD, and cancer is very well funded, and we got to do very, very amazing research with the best tools and best technologies. And it was when, during my sort of medical training, I was in a pediatric clinic when I met a small boy with a rare disease. And hearing from the story that they've traveled from hospital to hospital trying to figure out people to help them. And their disease is so rare that there are no researchers working on them. There are no federal grants on this. And that's when there has to be a way we can use these best technologies developed in other fields with common disease such as cancer to be able to help these kids. So that was sort of the big moment. This is a neglected field in science, and then how do we help? So that was the first way, sort of figure out the need and the cause that was important to pursue. The second thing was meeting up with my friend who started one of these crowdfunding companies. Their company right now over $80 million facilitated to help nonprofits using crowdfunding. So talking with them is that people are willing to crowdfund for art projects, which are great, or from very trivial things as well as trips and stuff like that. But imagine if you have a very motivated community surrounding a child who is sick. This is sort of literally life and death, and that's what we thought about. Crowdfunding would be a very good medium to be able to fund such research to help these kids. We have also different streams depending on the situation of the family. If they're eligible for grants, perfect. We don't have to sort of worry about funding them. If the family already have the financial means and capital to do it, it's easier for them just to fund it. However, most families aren't able to do this, and that's why we provide this online platform for families can do it very easily to raise funds, and without even having to start a foundation or a nonprofit, which often is sort of this standard right now. If you want to push for research with a rare disease or any sort of cause, you start, you find some families and start a foundation or nonprofit and try to do that and get a scientific advisory board. But the whole process is actually very difficult, and these families already are really stressed for time. They're burdened in terms of finances, and we just wanted to create an easy way, right? Without them having to start a nonprofit, without them having to create a scientific advisory board, we sort of give a solution in a box. We call it like a nonprofit in a box. Literally overnight, you can create a page, set up a project, and overnight we can connect you with researchers and start doing amazing research. Of course, the research takes time, but the process of getting to that, we try to make as simple as possible. With any new idea, you have the people who love it, who often are more forward-thinking and the innovators, and then there's the people of the old guard who are like, what are you doing? This is not how we do things. So definitely, we have big sort of camps of people on both sides, and I think often with ideas that really are changing things, if you don't have anybody pushing back, maybe that's a clue of maybe you're not pushing sort of hard enough. So yeah, definitely there's people within the traditional scientific community like, having patients initiate sort of science, this is kind of scary to us. And as well as traditional nonprofits, we want to go through the traditional way, but I think what we want to do is really empower and democratize scientific research and reach a sector which hasn't been addressed. I think right now of rare diseases, there's over 7,000 of them affecting over 25 million people, but only about 3% of them have any type of therapy at all. So there's 97% of these people, and most of them sort of travel from hospital to hospital trying to figure out what's wrong, like the little boy that I met. And that's the standard, and that is unacceptable as the standard right right now. Some of the fundraising stories have been cool. For example, we were able to fundraise for one mom, for example, she's a famous blogger, in less than a day. So we literally saw the money tick, and refresh and saw that money come in. Or we have other stories where it's actually pretty touching. One of our boys was fundraising and he got sick and he was in the ED. And people were like, we want to do something, right? And especially when the boy is actually sick, and again, sort of that really spurred on funding. But more on that, I think what we're really proud of is we've hit a tipping point in terms of recruiting researchers. So now, initially, it was very hard for us to go sort of door to door and knock on researchers' doors, and you know what, would you be willing to do research if we bring you a family and we provide the funding and just sort of help us there. The first few were very difficult, but now we're proud to say that people are coming to us. So now we have about sort of 15 sites within the U.S., some of the top universities, Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, Washington University, University of Washington, UCSF. But we're building also a global network of researchers. We're talking to people all over the country, from Israel to Bahrain to Colombia to the UK to Singapore, Malaysia. So what we're really proud of is our network has, in terms of building that scientific network, has really approached that tipping point where people are excited about the project, believes in it, and are coming to us and wanting to participate. I think ideas are never in a vacuum, right? No man is an island. So I think in initial stages, I would recommend talking with everybody you know about the idea and get all the sort of the feedback, good and bad, of it. And then eventually, hopefully, recruiting some believers in the cause. And I think having a team of people that is building that initiative is going to be important, right? If you're unable to convince your friends, people closest to you about this idea, it would be very difficult to then really propagate this idea. So that's number one, sort of talking to everybody, and then assembling a team. And that really goes to number two, is really having a solid team before, and that really is standing by your side. And I've been really lucky to be able to have friends who believe in the cause and sort of push us forward, because it takes more than one person. I think in these days to be able to do that. And I think with technology these days, teams could be built from next door neighbors as well as people around the world. Our team is spread literally around the world. And then thirdly, I think to be always sort of in the conversation, in the global conversation of whatever field you're in. So for us, it was with crowdfunding and also within the scientific conversation. So it was very important that we know, sort of done our homework about the science before we go to talk to the scientific researchers, right? It was very important for us to know what crowdfunding was. So when you go to talk to people, it's not just a good idea, but you also have a lot of content behind it. And you really understand where you're going into. I think having great ideas is not only for entrepreneurs or people starting whole new ventures, but everybody has great ideas, right? But I think the same amount often of sort of due diligence and sort of learning about the background is going to be very important for people, whether they're in a big company or whether in a sort of small startup venture. So even for people within, working in a large corporation, and we do have great ideas. Sometimes they could be really, out there and disruptive. Sometimes they're just a small incremental change. But able for you to convince people sort of higher up from you of, that this idea is worth thinking about and implementing. The same things that occur, in terms of really learning about that area that you want to change, right? And then really build a persuasive case about it, and really doing your homework of it. So it's not sort of you sitting in an office like, oh, I have a good idea, then sort of going to the person in your hierarchy like, what, we should do this, we should change the entire company because I just had this sort of eureka moment. But once you have the eureka moment, I think that then leads to you then learn all about similar things in the field, and really why this would work or not work, and what people's concerns are, and address them, and then present something, not just an idea, but a really good solid plan. anybody enter into sort of area of entrepreneurship or life in general, I think communication is going to be very, very important. And frankly, like I had very, very little training about it, and seriously, I sucked big time initially. I remember talking to the VCs initially. I'm like, oh, I have this great idea, blah, 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 and I just sort of spoke a million words a minute to someone, and the guy was just like, Jimmy, slow down, like here. What is the problem you're trying to solve? How are you going to solve it? Just tell me those things, So I've had sort of great feedback from people and a lot of practice. And I think ultimately, whether in sports or in life, I think having practice really helps. And that's why sort of pitching to your friends is helpful. So what makes a good pitch? Some of the early advice I had from VCs is to be able to really, first of all, state the problem you're trying to solve in a very clear and concise manner. And then why the problem is important, and why should anybody care about it? And then how are you going to solve it? And why are you the best people to be able to solve this? So just being able to address these 4 questions in a succinct way, I think is very helpful already. Of course, you can flesh it out better. I think to build legitimacy, often, numbers, whether, and traction and facts, that sort of help you. But that, again, is built on the skeleton of those 4 questions. Ultimately, it's sort of developing an idea to maturity, building a team around the believers, and then propagating it. So that is sort of a general principle. It works in the nonprofit sector, in the for-profit sector. It works from Martin Luther King building a movement. It works for Mother Teresa, and as well as working for Steve Jobs. So I think these are sort of general principles people can take away.